Semi's taking a big hit this morning. NVIDIA shares, of course, is to see down over 6%. The company says it will record a $5.5 billion charge that is tied to its H20 processors, many of which are exported to China. AMD also falling, saying it expects to take an $800 million hit related to export restrictions as well. Let's get the street's reaction. Cantor Fitzgerald analyst CJ Muse covers both stocks, has an overweight on both as well. CJ, good to have you. Was this a surprise?
Yeah, great to be here, Dave. Thank you for having me. Was it a surprise? I think given the investment that NVIDIA highlighted earlier in the week in terms of the $500 billion AI infrastructure, absolutely a surprise. I think as part of the art of the deal, there was a view that investment there, as well as a potential investment in a Intel Foundry JV, would be good enough to keep the door or window open for NVIDIA to ship H20s into China, but obviously not the case.
Yeah, we heard from our own Christina Partsinevelos, even if they were to get this license, for example, it could take as much as a year. I mean, do you basically say at this point the H20 in terms of sales to China is no longer going to ever happen?
Well, a license has never been granted for a accelerator GPU into China, so I think the odds are very slim. And I would highlight that, that is a very negative, factor for the United States. There are 20 GPU companies, indigenous to China. There are 4 that are actually quite good, and they're all within 1 to 2 years of providing a product that can compete with the H20 or potentially be better. And so I think the key question is, do you want those revenues going to Chinese companies, or do you want them going to NVIDIA as well as AMD? And, I think the decision that the U.S. government made is the wrong one.
Interesting. Yeah, it's funny. We were having a bit of a discussion this morning in the 9 about potential competition from domestic Chinese companies. I was looking at a competitor's note talking about Huawei's new AI Cloud Matrix 384 supernode nuclear-grade rack-scale system based on Ascen's 910C chips. I mean, is that the kind of thing you're talking about? And does that, where are the Chinese in terms of developing their own domestic chip industry and potentially even competing with some of the lower-end chips from our providers?
Yeah, I mean, that's Huawei. There's Byron, Cambricon. There's another major one I'm spacing. But, they're real. I think that they are clearly behind in terms of not having access to the leading edge wafers from TSMC, but they're making up for it with a overall system solution that has robust networking and other capabilities that are enabling them to come to market with a solution that is quite good for AI. And I would never discount kind of China, and so that they're going to be very aggressive. And I think on this front, it would be better to perhaps, have a bar that, they can't access and have U.S., have maybe 3 nodes of it in advancement, but, keep the window open for supply from these, U.S. or multinational vendors such that, the revenues and the R&D capabilities accrue to, the multinationals as opposed to the indigenous Chinese companies. So, this is only going to make internal China semiconductors stronger.
Can you, CJ, explain the accounting decision-making here to write down the inventory? Why can't they just sell these chips to another non-Chinese country?
Yeah, so, here's the discouraging part, right? They were building hoppers for China, and then the U.S. government came in and said, well, you can't ship that high-level GPU. We need you to lower the specs, and that's where NVIDIA came up with the H20. So that's a chip that is only sold into China specifically for China, and that everywhere else globally, they want access to the more, bleeding edge chips from NVIDIA. So it's a chip specifically designed for China. And if there's not going to be a license granted for shipment, then they're obsolete.
Anything on AMD or, for that matter, ASML this morning, all of which seems to be pressuring, obviously, your overall group?
Yeah, a week and a half ago, I was getting questions, will semiconductor companies guide given the uncertainty? And I had thought that ASML reiterating the midpoint of the guide for all of 2025, would be a positive. But I think if you take a step back and you think about, all of the conflicting commentary coming out of D.C. and, tariff this, not tariff this, and, now we've got an embargo on shipments to China, it's almost made semiconductor investing uninvestable. And so, I think we need to get rid of this, uncertainty and volatility. And then I think investors will come back to the group. But, absent, that reduction of uncertainty, it's difficult to want to step in. So, as you highlighted to start the case, I like NVIDIA very much. It's our top pick. I like ASML as well. Yet, today, it's difficult to step in given, kind of the geopolitical uncertainty.
Yeah, it's a refrain I hear quite often, of course, as well from the buy side. CJ, thank you. Appreciate it.